I found the letter wedged in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, and the moment I saw the Pine Brook Springs Homeowners Association letterhead, I knew my peaceful life in rural Montana was about to get complicated. The envelope contained a notice informing me that the HOA had scheduled emergency sewer line repairs that would require access to the utility easement running through the rear portion of my property. What easement? I had bought this 5-acre plot 3 years ago specifically because it was free and clear. No restrictions, no HOA drama, just me and my land outside the city limits of Billings. My name is Gregory Ashford, and I had spent the better part of my 30s working as a civil engineer in Seattle before burning out completely and moving to Montana to restore a 1940s farmhouse. The property was gorgeous, nestled against rolling hills with a clear view of the mountains in the distance. When I purchased it, the seller had been an elderly widow whose husband had owned the land since the 1960s. The title search came back clean. No easements, no encumbrances, nothing but pure, unobstructed ownership. I read the letter 3 times, my confusion turning into irritation. The notice claimed that an easement had been established in 2019, 5 years ago, granting the Pine Brook Springs HOA perpetual access to a 20-foot wide corridor along my southern property line for sewage infrastructure maintenance and repairs. The letter was signed by someone named Patricia Morningside, HOA president, and it demanded I provide immediate access or face legal action. The problem was that I had never heard of this easement, and more importantly, I had never agreed to it. I grabbed my property deed and the title insurance documents from my filing cabinet and spread them across my kitchen table. I went through every page with a highlighter, searching for any mention of easements, utility access, or HOA involvement. Nothing. The property was described as free and clear, fee simple absolute ownership, the most complete form of property ownership recognized by law. I called my real estate attorney, Marcus Webb, first thing Wednesday morning. Marcus had handled my property purchase and was familiar with every detail of the transaction. His voice was cheerful when he answered, but it quickly turned serious as I explained the situation. "Gregory, I remember your closing very clearly," Marcus said. "There were no easements on that property. I would have flagged it immediately. Can you email me a copy of that letter?" I scanned it and sent it over while we stayed on the phone. I heard him typing, presumably pulling up my file on his computer. "This is bizarre," Marcus muttered. "An easement recorded in 2019? That would have been before you purchased the property in 2022. It should have shown up in the title search. Let me pull the county records and see what I can find. I will call you back within the hour." That hour felt like a week. I spent the time walking my property line, trying to figure out what the HOA was talking about. My land sat just outside the boundaries of Pine Brook Springs, a relatively new development of cookie-cutter homes that had sprung up in the last decade. The HOA governed about 200 homes, all packed together on quarter-acre lots with strict rules about lawn height, fence colors, and probably what brand of toilet paper residents could use. My property, by contrast, was grandfathered in, predating the development by decades. I'd assumed that meant I was blissfully free from HOA interference. The development was connected to the county sewer system, and as far as I knew, all their infrastructure ran through their own property and the county right-of-way along the main road. Marcus called back 90 minutes later, and his tone told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. "Gregory, we have a problem. There's an easement recorded in the county records, dated March 2019. It grants the Pine Brook Springs HOA access to a corridor on your land for sewer infrastructure." My stomach dropped. How is that possible? I did not own the land in 2019. The previous owner did. "That's the thing," Marcus said. "The easement document shows a signature from someone named Helen Carmichael. But when I cross-referenced it with your purchase documents, the seller's name was Helen Montgomery. Montgomery was her married name. Carmichael was her maiden name, which she had not used legally in over 50 years. So it is a fake signature? It gets worse. I called the title company that handled your purchase, and they are pulling their records now. But here's what I found. The easement was recorded at the county clerk's office on March 15, 2019, at 4:47 in the afternoon. According to the hospital records I was able to access through a colleague, Helen Montgomery was admitted to Billings General Hospital on March 14, 2019, and remained there until March 22, 2019, following a stroke. There is no way she could have signed this document. I felt my hands clench into fists. Someone forged her signature. That's what it looks like. And there is more. The easement document lists a notary public named Robert Kellerman. I checked with the Montana Secretary of State's office. Robert Kellerman's notary commission expired in 2017 and was never renewed. He could not have legally notarized anything in 2019. So we have a forged signature and an invalid notarization. This easement is completely fraudulent. Yes, but it is still recorded in the county records, which means it is creating a cloud on your title. We need to get this cleared up immediately. I'm going to draft a letter to the HOA, informing them that the easement is invalid and demanding they cease any construction on your property. In the meantime, do not let anyone onto your land. That afternoon, I drove down to the county clerk's office in downtown Billings to see the easement document for myself. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, pulled up the record on her computer and printed me a copy. The document was surprisingly professional-looking, complete with legal descriptions, survey maps, and official-looking stamps. But when I examined it closely, I could see the irregularities Marcus had mentioned. The signature purporting to be Helen Carmichael's looked shaky and uncertain, nothing like the firm, clear signature on my purchase documents. The notary stamp was slightly blurred, as if it had been photocopied and pasted rather than applied directly. "Can I get copies of everything related to this easement?" I asked the clerk, "including the recording information and any supporting documents?" She nodded and made me a full set of copies for $20. I took them and headed straight to the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. If someone had forged a legal document and used it to fraudulently claim an easement on my property, that was a crime, and I wanted it investigated. The deputy who took my report was a young guy named Officer Daniels who looked fresh out of the academy. He listened to my story, took notes, and examined the documents I had brought. "This is pretty complicated, Mr. Ashford," he said. "Property disputes usually get handled in civil court. Are you sure this is a criminal matter?" "Forgery of a legal document is a crime," I said. "Someone falsified a property owner's signature to create an easement that did not exist. That is fraud. I want to file a report." Officer Daniels sighed, but took down all the information. He said a detective would follow up with me, though he made it clear that property crimes were not exactly a high priority compared to the other cases they were handling. I left feeling frustrated, but at least satisfied that I had started the official process. When I got home, there was a truck parked at the edge of my property, right along the southern border where the supposed easement ran. Two men in work boots and high visibility vests were walking the fence line with surveying equipment, and behind them, a woman in khaki pants and a crisp white blouse was supervising with a clipboard in hand. She had that particular look, perfectly highlighted blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of self-righteous posture that screamed HOA board member. I parked my truck and walked over quickly. "Excuse me, what are you doing on my property?" The woman turned to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You must be Mr. Ashford. I'm Patricia Morningside, president of the Pine Brook Springs Homeowners Association. We sent you a letter about the sewer line repairs. We are just doing a preliminary survey before we start the excavation work next week." "You are not starting any excavation work because this is my property and you do not have permission to be here." Patricia's smile hardened. "Actually, we do have permission. We have an easement that grants us access for utility maintenance. It is all in the county records. That easement is fraudulent. The signature was forged, and the notary was not legally authorized. My attorney is preparing a challenge, and I have filed a police report. You need to leave my property immediately." The two workers exchanged glances and started backing away, clearly not wanting to get involved in a property dispute. Patricia, however, did not budge. "Mr. Ashford, I understand you are upset, but the fact is that this easement is legally recorded. Until a court says otherwise, it is valid, and we have the right to access this land. The sewer line that serves all 200 homes in Pine Brook Springs runs directly under this corridor. We have a broken pipe that is causing backups, and we need to repair it. If you interfere with essential utility work, you could be liable for damages." The sewer line runs under my property? I felt my face getting hot. How did a sewer line get installed on my land without my knowledge or permission? Patricia waved her hand dismissively. The line was installed in 2019 when the development was expanded. The easement was properly recorded at that time. This is not our problem if you did not do your due diligence when you bought the property. I did do my due diligence, and there was no easement on my title when I purchased this land. Someone in your HOA forged documents to create a fake easement. That makes the entire sewer line trespassing infrastructure, and I want it removed from my property. Patricia's expression turned cold. That's not going to happen, Mr. Ashford. That sewer line serves 200 families. You cannot just demand it be removed. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You are the ones who buried a sewer line under my property without permission. That was your mistake, not mine. Now get off my land before I call the sheriff. Patricia made a big show of checking her watch. Fine, we will leave for now. But our attorney will be in touch, and I promise you, this is going to end badly for you if you keep being difficult. You cannot fight the entire HOA. I watched them pack up their equipment and drive away, my heart pounding with anger and adrenaline. This was insane. How had a sewer line been installed on my property without anyone noticing or objecting? I walked the southern property line, looking for any sign of the infrastructure Patricia had mentioned. About 40 feet in from the fence, I found it. A series of small concrete access covers partially hidden in the tall grass. They were manhole covers, each about 2 feet in diameter, presumably providing access to the sewer line below. I took photos of everything with my phone, documenting the location and condition of the access points. Then I called Marcus again and told him about the confrontation with Patricia and the discovery of the actual sewer line. They actually buried a sewer line on your property? Marcus sounded stunned. Gregory, this is bigger than I thought. If they installed physical infrastructure based on a fraudulent easement, they have been trespassing and they have created an encumbrance on your property without legal authority. You potentially have a case for damages, not to mention the cost of removing the infrastructure. Can they really be forced to remove it? I asked. Patricia said it serves 200 homes. That is their problem, not yours. They chose to install critical infrastructure on land they did not have legal access to. The fact that it serves a lot of homes does not give them the right to trespass. However, I will warn you, the HOA is going to fight this hard. Removing and rerouting a sewer line could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more. They will throw everything they have at you to avoid that outcome. Let them try. I did not do anything wrong here. They did. Marcus agreed to expedite the legal challenge to the easement. He would file a quiet title action, which is a lawsuit asking the court to declare that the easement is invalid and remove it from the county records. He estimated it would take several months to get a court date, but he could also file for a temporary restraining order to prevent the HOA from doing any work on my property in the meantime. Over the next few days, I started doing my own research into how this situation had come about. I drove over to Pine Brook Springs and walked around the development, trying to understand the layout of their sewer system. The development was built in phases, with the original section completed around 2015 and subsequent phases added over the following years. The newest section, which bordered my property, had been completed in late 2019. I went to the county planning department and requested copies of all the permits and site plans associated with the Pine Brook Springs development. The clerk warned me that it would be a significant stack of documents, but I told her I wanted everything. 2 days later, I picked up a box containing hundreds of pages of blueprints, permit applications, environmental reviews, and inspection reports. I spent an entire weekend going through the documents in my living room, papers spread across every available surface. What I discovered was damning. The original site plan for the development, approved in 2014, showed the sewer line running entirely within the development's boundaries and connecting to the county sewer main along the public road. There was no indication of any infrastructure extending onto adjacent private property. But when I looked at the revised site plan submitted in 2018 for the expansion phase, I found a different story. The new plans showed the sewer line deviating from the original route and cutting across a corner of the property to the south, my property, before connecting back to the county system. A note on the plan indicated easement pending for the affected area. I checked the date on the permit approval, January 2019. Construction began in February 2019. The fraudulent easement was recorded in March 2019. It looked like the HOA or their developer had started building the sewer line before they actually had legal permission to use my property. Then, when they realized they needed an easement, someone had forged the documents to create one retroactively. I made copies of all the relevant documents and added them to my file. This was evidence of intentional wrongdoing, not just a mistake or oversight. Someone had deliberately falsified legal documents to cover up an unauthorized infrastructure project. On Monday morning, I got a call from a detective with the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. Detective Sarah Morrison introduced herself and said she had been assigned to investigate my complaint about the forged easement. "Mr. Ashford, I have reviewed your report and the documents you provided," Detective Morrison said. "This does appear to be a case of forgery and fraud. I have reached out to Helen Montgomery's family to get a statement confirming she did not sign the easement document. I'm also going to interview the notary, Robert Kellerman, to find out if he was involved or if someone used his information without permission. This is going to take some time, but I wanted you to know we are taking it seriously." I thanked her and provided her with the additional information I had discovered about the construction timeline and the permit documents. Detective Morrison said that if the investigation confirmed criminal activity, she would pursue charges. However, she warned me that the actual prosecution would be up to the county attorney's office, and they might decide to let it be handled as a civil matter instead. That same afternoon, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Billings representing the Pinebrook Springs HOA. The letter was 10 pages long and full of legal jargon, but the basic message was clear. The HOA claimed the easement was valid, they intended to proceed with the sewer line repairs, and if I interfered, they would sue me for damages and seek an injunction forcing me to allow access. I forwarded the letter to Marcus, who called me back within an hour. "They are trying to intimidate you," Marcus said. "This is standard aggressive litigation tactics. Do not let it rattle you. I am filing our quiet title action tomorrow, and I am also filing for a temporary restraining order to stop them from entering your property until the case is resolved. We have a strong case, Gregory. The evidence of forgery is clear." The temporary restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I installed game cameras along my property line to make sure the HOA did not try to access my land while I was away. I also put up no trespassing signs every 50 feet along the fence, making it crystal clear that entry was not permitted. On Thursday evening, I got home from a supply run in Billings to find that someone had cut my fence and driven heavy equipment onto my property. Deep tire tracks scarred the ground, leading to one of the sewer access points, and the concrete cover had been removed. I could see down into the hole where a large pipe ran underground. I was furious. I immediately called the sheriff's office and reported the trespassing and property damage. Then, I called Marcus and told him what had happened. "They are violating your property rights while we are in active litigation," Marcus said. "This is outrageous. I'm going to file an emergency motion with the court first thing tomorrow morning. Document everything, take photos and videos. If anyone is still on your property, do not confront them. Let the police handle it." The sheriff's deputy arrived about 20 minutes later. It was a different officer this time, a veteran named Deputy Franklin, who took the situation much more seriously than the younger officer had. He examined the cut fence and the tire tracks, then walked over to the open access hole. "Whoever did this committed criminal trespass and property damage," Deputy Franklin said. "Do you have any idea who it was?" "I'm in a dispute with the Pinebrook Springs HOA," I explained. "They claim they have an easement to access this area for sewer repairs, but the easement is fraudulent. We have a restraining order hearing scheduled for next week." Deputy Franklin took detailed notes and photos. "I will write this up as a criminal complaint. If you can identify the individuals or company that did this, we can pursue charges. In the meantime, I would suggest securing your property better, maybe a locked gate or additional fencing." After the deputy left, I spent the rest of the evening reviewing my game camera footage. The cameras had captured everything. At around 2 in the afternoon, a truck from a company called Rapid Excavation Services had pulled up to my fence line. 2 workers had used bolt cutters to cut through the chain-link fence, then driven a small excavator onto my property. They had worked for about 90 minutes, removing the access cover and apparently inspecting the sewer line before leaving. I downloaded all the footage and sent it to both Marcus and Detective Morrison. The license plate of the truck was clearly visible, as were the faces of the 2 workers. This was undeniable evidence of trespassing. Marcus filed the emergency motion on Friday morning, and we got a hearing scheduled for that same afternoon. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Catherine Reynolds, listened to both sides present their arguments. The HOA's attorney, a slick-looking guy named Richard Pemberton, argued that the sewer line was critical infrastructure serving 200 homes, that any delay in repairs could cause a public health crisis, and that the easement was presumptively valid as a recorded document. Marcus countered with the evidence of forgery, the timeline showing Helen Montgomery was hospitalized when the document was allegedly signed, and the proof that the notary's commission had expired. He also presented the game camera footage showing the HOA's contractors trespassing on my property despite knowing there was an active legal dispute. Judge Reynolds was not impressed with the HOA's position. "Mr. Pemberton, your clients cut through Mr. Ashford's fence and entered his property without permission while this matter was pending before the court. That shows a blatant disregard for property rights and the legal process. I am issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting the Pinebrook Springs HOA, their contractors, and their representatives from entering Mr. Ashford's property until the validity of the easement can be determined at trial. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Do I make myself clear?" Pemberton nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Furthermore," Judge Reynolds continued, "I am expediting the quiet title action. I want this resolved quickly before anyone else's property rights get trampled. We will have a full hearing in 4 weeks. Both sides will present all evidence and witnesses at that time. Court is adjourned." I felt a surge of relief as we left the courthouse. Marcus was pleased with the outcome. "That was a good result, Gregory. The judge clearly sees the problems with the HOA's position. Now, we just need to prepare for the full hearing and prove the easement is invalid." Over the next 4 weeks, Marcus and I prepared our case meticulously. We obtained a sworn statement from Helen Montgomery's daughter, confirming that her mother had been hospitalized in March 2019 and could not have signed any documents. We got an affidavit from Robert Kellerman, the notary, stating that he had never notarized any document related to my property and that his commission had expired in 2017. We hired a forensic document examiner who analyzed the signature on the easement and concluded it was highly likely to be a forgery, based on comparison with known authentic samples of Helen Montgomery's handwriting. We also subpoenaed records from Rapid Excavation Services and the HOA, seeking information about who had authorized the installation of the sewer line and the creation of the easement. What we discovered was explosive. The records showed that in late 2018, the developer building the Pinebrook Springs expansion, a company called Summit Properties LLC, had realized their approved site plan would not work. The sewer line could not be routed entirely within the development's boundaries due to elevation and soil issues. The most cost-effective solution was to cut across a corner of the adjacent property to the south. Summit Properties had approached Helen Montgomery in December 2018 to request an easement, but she had refused. According to a memo we found in the subpoenaed documents, Helen told the developer's representative that she did not want any part of her property used for the development's infrastructure and that they should find another way. Rather than redesigning the sewer system or negotiating further, Summit Properties had apparently decided to proceed anyway. They buried the sewer line in February and March of 2019, according to the revised site plan, crossing my property without permission. Then, to cover up the illegal construction, someone had created the fraudulent easement document and recorded it in March 2019. The smoking gun was an email we found from Patricia Morningside, who at the time was serving as the HOA's vice president and liaison to the developer. In the email, dated March 10, 2019, Patricia had written to the developer's project manager, We cannot wait any longer for the old lady to change her mind. The line is already in the ground. Just get the easement recorded however you need to. I will sign off on it for the HOA. Marcus was ecstatic when he read that email. This shows knowledge and intent. Patricia Morningside knew the easement was not legitimate, and she told the developer to record it anyway. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. The full hearing took place on a cold November morning. The courthouse was busy, but our case was given priority given the restraining order in place. Judge Reynolds presided again, and both sides presented their evidence. Marcus called Helen Montgomery's daughter, Elizabeth Hartwell, to testify first. Elizabeth was a composed woman in her 60s who clearly took the matter seriously. "My mother suffered a stroke on March 14th, 2019, Elizabeth testified. She was in the hospital for over a week. She was barely conscious during that time. There is absolutely no way she could have signed any legal documents and certainly not gone to a notary public." Marcus introduced the hospital records corroborating Elizabeth's testimony, along with the forensic document examiner's report showing the signature was likely forged. Next, Marcus called Robert Kellerman, the notary whose stamp appeared on the easement document. Kellerman was a retired accountant who seemed bewildered to be involved in the case. "I let my notary commission lapse in 2017, Kellerman testified. "I do not know how my name ended up on this document. I certainly did not notarize it. I have never met Helen Montgomery or anyone from the Pinebrook Springs HOA. The most dramatic moment came when Marcus called Patricia Morningside to the stand. Patricia had been sitting in the gallery with Richard Pemberton, looking confident and composed. But as she took the witness stand, I could see her nervousness. Marcus started with basic questions establishing Patricia's role in the HOA and her involvement with the development process. Then he displayed the email on a large monitor for the court to see. "Ms. Morningside, did you write this email on March 10th, 2019? Patricia glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. "I do not recall that specific email." "It came from your email address, and we have verified its authenticity with the email server records." Let me read it again. "We cannot wait any longer for the old lady to change her mind. The line is already in the ground. Just get the easement recorded however you need to. I will sign off on it for the HOA." "What did you mean by get the easement recorded however you need to?" Patricia stammered. "I meant through the proper legal channels." "But there were no proper legal channels available because Helen Montgomery had refused to grant an easement, correct?" "I do not remember the exact situation." "Ms. Morningside, you knew that Helen Montgomery had refused to grant an easement. You knew the sewer line had already been installed on her property without permission, and you told the developer to record an easement document regardless of whether it was legitimate. Is not that true?" Richard Pemberton jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness." Judge Reynolds looked at Patricia over her reading glasses. "I will allow it. Ms. Morningside, please answer the question." Patricia's composure cracked. "I was trying to solve a problem for the community. 200 families were depending on that sewer line. Helen Montgomery was being unreasonable. She did not even use that part of her property." "So you admit you knew the easement was not properly obtained?" Marcus pressed. Patricia realized her mistake. "I want to speak to my attorney," Judge Reynolds intervened. "Ms. Morningside, you are not on trial here, so you do not have a right to counsel in that sense. However, I am going to remind you that you are under oath and anything you say can be used in future proceedings. Do you wish to continue testifying?" Patricia looked at Richard Pemberton, who looked extremely uncomfortable. After a whispered consultation, Patricia invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and refused to answer any more questions. The rest of the hearing was largely a formality. The HOA's attorney tried to argue that even if the easement document was problematic, the HOA had relied on it in good faith and that removing the sewer line would be an unreasonable burden on the community. But Judge Reynolds was not having it. "Mr. Pemberton, your clients installed a sewer line on private property without permission, then created a fraudulent easement document to cover up that fact. The president of the HOA appears to have been directly involved in this scheme. I find as a matter of law that the easement is invalid and must be removed from the county records. Furthermore, The sewer line constitutes a trespassing encroachment on Mr. Ashford's property, and the HOA must remove it or relocate it at their expense within 6 months. Any damages to Mr. Ashford's property must be repaired, and he is entitled to recover his legal fees and costs. I am also referring this matter to the county attorney's office for investigation of possible criminal charges. The courtroom was silent for a moment. Then, Patricia Morningside let out a strangled noise and rushed out of the courtroom. Richard Pemberton looked like he wanted to follow her, but stayed seated. After the hearing, Marcus and I stood on the courthouse steps, and I felt a mixture of relief and vindication. "We won," I said, still processing it. "We did more than win," Marcus said. "We exposed a criminal conspiracy. The HOA is going to be in serious legal trouble, not just with you, but potentially with criminal authorities, and they are going to have to spend a fortune relocating that sewer line." Over the next few weeks, the fallout was significant. Detective Morrison's investigation, combined with Judge Reynolds's findings, led to criminal charges being filed against Patricia Morningside and 2 executives from Summit Properties LLC for forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. The local newspaper picked up the story, and it became a minor scandal in the Billings area. The Pinebrook Springs HOA held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Patricia Morningside as president. They also voted to sue Summit Properties LLC to recover the costs of relocating the sewer line, arguing that the developer had created the problem by installing the line illegally in the first place. I received a formal apology letter from the HOA's new president, a reasonable-sounding man named Thomas Sullivan, who acknowledged the wrongdoing and promised that the sewer line would be relocated promptly. The HOA hired an engineering firm to design a new route for the sewer line that stayed entirely within the development's boundaries and the county right-of-way. It required installing a pumping station and running the line along a different path, but it was feasible. The relocation work began in early spring of the following year. I monitored the progress carefully, but this time everything was done properly and legally. The HOA's contractors removed the pipe from my property, filled in the trench, and repaired the ground surface. They paid for professional landscaping to restore the area, and I had to admit, they did a decent job. Marcus negotiated a settlement for my damages and legal fees. The HOA paid me $75,000 to cover the cost of my fence repairs, property damage, legal expenses, and compensation for the trespass and the stress of the whole ordeal. It was more money than I had expected, but Marcus argued that the HOA's conduct had been so egregious that they needed to pay a significant amount to make me whole. The criminal case against Patricia Morningside and the Summit Properties executives moved slowly through the system. Eventually, Patricia pleaded guilty to 1 count of fraud and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. The Summit Properties executives faced more serious charges and ended up with similar plea deals. The county attorney made it clear that while the crimes were serious, the lack of any prior criminal history and the fact that no one was physically harmed led to the more lenient sentences. For me, the whole experience was a lesson in standing up for my rights, even when facing a powerful opponent. The HOA had tried to bully me, assuming I would back down rather than fight a long legal battle. But I had the law on my side, and I had documentation proving their wrongdoing. By the summer of that year, the sewer line was completely relocated, my property was restored, and the fraudulent easement was officially removed from the county records. My title was clear again, and I finally had the peace and quiet I had moved to Montana to find. But the story did not quite end there. In August, I received a phone call from Thomas Sullivan, the new HOA president. "Mr. Ashford, I know we've had our differences, but I wanted to reach out about something," Thomas said. "The HOA is in the process of updating all our infrastructure maps and records to make sure we never have another situation like the one with your property. In reviewing our system, we have discovered that the county's records for the main sewer trunk line are incorrect in several places. We need to commission a proper survey and create accurate as-built drawings." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "Well, in looking at the survey data, we realized something interesting. When the original Pinebrook Springs development was built back in 2015, The county granted the developer an easement for the main sewer trunk line. That easement runs along the county road right of way and was supposed to stay entirely on the county's property. But according to the new survey, a portion of that trunk line actually crosses about 10 feet onto the edge of what is now your property. It is a different section from where the fraudulent easement was. This appears to be a surveying error from 2015 that nobody caught. I felt a sense of déjà vu. So you are telling me there is another sewer line on my property that should not be there? Technically, yes, but this one is different. The county granted the easement, not the HOA, and the line has been there since 2015, which predates your ownership. The issue is that the easement document describes the wrong location, because the survey was wrong. The county is willing to grant a corrected easement, but they need your permission as the current property owner. I thought about this carefully. What happens if I do not give permission? Thomas sighed. Honestly, I do not know. The line is already there and has been for years. The county would probably argue that they have a prescriptive easement based on continuous use, but that would be another legal battle. Mr. Ashford, I am not trying to cause more problems. I just wanted to be upfront with you about what we found. After everything that happened, I believe in being completely transparent. I appreciated his honesty. Let me think about it and discuss it with my attorney. But Thomas, I will tell you right now, if the county wants an easement, they are going to have to pay for it. I am not just giving away property rights after what I have been through. That is completely fair, Thomas said. I will let the county know they need to negotiate with you directly. Over the following months, I did negotiate with Yellowstone County for a proper, legal easement covering the small section where their trunk line crossed my property. The county initially offered a token payment of $1, which is standard for utility easements, but I rejected it. With Marcus's help, I argued that the county's surveying error had created an encumbrance on my property, and they needed to compensate me fairly. We eventually settled on a payment of $20,000, plus annual maintenance fees of $500, plus an agreement that if the county ever needed to do major work on that section of line, they would pay for any damages or disruption to my property. The county agreed, the easement was properly drafted and recorded, and I finally had a clean resolution to all the sewer line issues. Looking back on the entire ordeal, from finding that first letter in my mailbox to the final settlement with the county, I learned several important lessons. First, always verify what you are told, especially when it comes to legal documents and property rights. Second, standing up to bullies and organizations that abuse their power is worth the effort, even when it is stressful and time-consuming. Third, good documentation and evidence are crucial. Without those game cameras, the email records, and the hospital records, proving my case would have been much harder. The experience also changed how I viewed my property and my place in the community. I had moved to Montana seeking solitude and independence, and in a strange way, fighting for my property rights had given me an even deeper connection to my land. Every time I walked my property line or looked out at the mountains in the distance, I knew that I had stood up for what was mine, and won. The Pinebrook Springs HOA learned some lessons too. According to Thomas Sullivan, whom I occasionally saw around town, the HOA completely overhauled their procedures for dealing with infrastructure and property issues. They hired a professional management company to handle legal matters and made sure all their records were accurate and up to date. The scandal had been embarrassing and expensive, but it had forced positive changes. As for Patricia Morningside, I heard through the grapevine that she had moved away from Billings after her probation ended. The public humiliation of the criminal case and her removal from the HOA board had been too much for her to bear in a relatively small community where everyone knew everyone else's business. I did not feel particularly sorry for her. She had made deliberate choices to commit fraud and trespass on my property, and she had paid the legal consequences. One afternoon in late October, about 18 months after the whole mess began, I was working on replacing some siding on my house when I saw a car pull up my driveway. It was Elizabeth Hartwell, Helen Montgomery's daughter. "Mr. Ashford, I hope I'm not bothering you," Elizabeth said as she got out of her car. "I wanted to stop by and thank you personally for what you did." "Thank me? I was just protecting my property rights." "It is more than that. Elizabeth said. When my mother sold you this land, she was in declining health and did not fully understand all the legal issues. If you had not fought to expose that fraudulent easement, her name would still be on a forged document. You cleared her reputation. That means a lot to our family. I had not thought about it that way. I am glad I could help, I said. Your mother was right to refuse the easement when the developer asked. She knew this land was valuable and should not be given away lightly. Elizabeth smiled. She was a stubborn woman, my mother. She would have liked you, I think. You have the same quality of not backing down when you know you are right. After Elizabeth left, I stood in my yard and looked around at the property I had fought so hard to protect. The autumn sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land. The sewer line was gone, replaced with nothing but grass and open space. My fence was repaired and stronger than before. The fraudulent easement was erased from the records. Everything was as it should be. I realized that in fighting the HOA, I had not just defended my property, but had also defended something bigger. The principle that property rights matter, that legal documents should be legitimate and honest, and that powerful organizations should not be allowed to steamroll individual citizens. The Pine Brook Springs HOA had learned that lesson the hard way, but hopefully it was a lesson that would stick. I finished the siding work as the sun set, satisfied with both the physical work on my house and the legal work that had protected it. Montana had proven to be exactly the fresh start I had hoped for, though in ways I had never expected. I had left behind the corporate engineering world to find peace and independence, and I had found both, along with a hard-fought lesson in standing up for myself. The wind picked up as I put away my tools, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow from the mountains. Winter was coming, and I looked forward to spending it in my fully restored farmhouse on my fully protected property, with no HOA drama to disturb the peace. I had earned that peace through determination, good legal help, and a refusal to back down when I knew I was right. The whole experience had been exhausting, frustrating, and expensive, but ultimately rewarding. I had discovered that I had the strength to fight for what mattered to me, and I had won. The HOA had tried to bury a sewer line under my land and claimed they had the right to do so, but in the end, I had proven that property rights still mean something, that fraud will be exposed, and that even a single person can stand up to a powerful organization and prevail. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the stars come out over the Montana landscape. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, checking in to see how I was doing. I texted back that everything was good, better than good actually. The nightmare with the HOA was fully behind me, and I could finally move forward with my life without looking over my shoulder or waiting for the next legal shoe to drop. I thought about all the people who had been involved in the saga. Patricia Morningside, who had let her desire to solve a problem for the community override her ethical obligations and ended up with a criminal record. The Summit Properties executives who had made the same choice and faced the same consequences. The HOA members who had trusted their leadership and been betrayed. Detective Morrison and Judge Reynolds, who had taken my case seriously and seen justice done. Marcus Webb, who had been an excellent advocate and advisor. And Helen Montgomery, who had stood her ground when the developer tried to pressure her, and whose instinct to protect her property rights had been vindicated even after her death. I also thought about my own journey. I had come to Montana seeking escape from the stress and complexity of urban life, only to find myself in the middle of a complex legal battle. But in fighting that battle, I had discovered something important about myself. I was not someone who would be pushed around or intimidated, even by organizations that seemed more powerful than me. I had the courage to stand up for my rights and the wisdom to seek good legal counsel and let the system work. As I finished my coffee and headed inside for the night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My property was mine, fully and completely, with no clouds on the title and no unwanted infrastructure buried beneath the surface. The HOA had learned an expensive lesson about respecting property rights and following the law. Justice had been served, both in civil court and in criminal proceedings. The experience had also taught me about the importance of community and relationships, even for someone who had moved to rural Montana seeking solitude. Thomas Sullivan and the reformed HOA board had reached out to make amends, and we had developed a respectful, if distant, relationship. Elizabeth Hartwell had thanked me for clearing her mother's name, creating an unexpected connection. Even Detective Morrison and Judge Reynolds had shown me that the system could work when people in positions of authority took their responsibilities seriously. In the end, the story of the HOA that tried to bury a sewer line under my land and claimed they had the right to do so became a story about standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. It became a story about the importance of property rights and honest dealing in legal matters, and it became a story about how one person, armed with evidence and good legal help, can take on a powerful organization and win. The Montana night was cold and clear, and inside my house, the wood stove radiated warmth. I had fought my battle and won my peace. The land was mine, the title was clear, and the future stretched ahead full of possibility. I had no regrets about standing my ground, and I knew that if I ever faced a similar situation again, I would make the same choices. Some things are worth fighting for, and property rights, personal integrity, and the rule of law are definitely among them. As I climbed into bed that night, I felt grateful for the journey I had been on, as difficult as parts of it had been. I had learned about myself, about the legal system, and about the importance of never backing down when you know you are right. The HOA had tried to control my land through fraud and deception, but in the end, I had not only defended my property, but it also helped expose wrongdoing and bring about positive change. That was something to be proud of. The wind whistled around the house, a sound I had come to love during my time in Montana. It spoke of wide open spaces, freedom, and independence, all the things I had moved here to find. And despite the unexpected legal battle with the HOA, I had found exactly what I was looking for. My land was truly mine, protected by law and defended by my own determination. The sewer line was gone, the fraudulent easement was erased, and the people responsible for the wrongdoing had faced consequences. Tomorrow would bring new projects and new challenges, as every day does. But none of them would involve fighting off an HOA trying to claim rights to my property that they never legally had. That chapter was closed, finished, resolved. I had control over my land and my life, and nobody could take that away from me. The HOA had learned that lesson the hard way, and I had learned the value of standing firm in defense of what is rightfully mine. It was a good lesson for everyone involved, even if the learning process had been painful and expensive for some. Sleep came easily that night, the sleep of someone who knows they have done the right thing and seen it through to a successful conclusion. The battles were over, the victories were won, and the future was bright. My Montana farmhouse stood on land that was fully and completely mine, and that was exactly how it should be.